Just reading the news every day might be enough to prompt us to pray as Habakkuk prayed in the first reading today. How long, O Lord? So much violence, why don't you intervene? Why do you let us see so much ruin? Why must we look at misery? Why so much destruction and strife and discord? Many of us, even most of us, might pray these words just looking at our own family circumstances and the situations of our friends and neighbors. How long, O Lord? Sickness, pain, disappointment, loss and grief, violence, war, hurricanes, bitterness and division. Who among us has never prayed, how long, O Lord? Please, no more bad news, God. My plate's already too full. Why me, Lord? Why my family? Doesn't seem fair. Did I do something to deserve all this? Are you listening to my prayers, God? Why don't you answer me? What can I do? How long, O Lord? That kind of prayer, and it is prayer, is a particular kind of prayer. It's called a lament. Laments rise up out of pain. But laments are good because they help us vent from deep in our souls, vent our troubles, our worries, our suffering, our desire and our need for healing. Lamenting helps relieve our hearts of pain and can help in leading us away from despair and closer to hope. So I'm giving voice here this afternoon to all our lamenting, not to remind us of our troubles and to make us feel worse, but because lamenting can help bring us precisely to that place in our hearts where Jesus comes to meet our pain. Perhaps that's where the apostles found themselves when they pleaded with Jesus in the gospel, Lord, increase our faith. Is that what we need, you and I? Do we need more faith? Maybe we do. Maybe we don't. Jesus tells the apostles that if they had faith the size of a mustard seed, and if you know mustard seeds, they're little tiny, tiny little seeds, that if they had faith the size of a mustard seed, they could uproot a full-grown mulberry tree and plant it in the sea by a word of faith. I don't know about you, but I don't think my faith could weed a small garden, let alone do major landscaping. And I like to think that I have faith at least a little larger than a mustard seed. But my faith won't move mountains or trees. Truth is, sometimes my faith doesn't even move me. And maybe this is what Jesus is getting at here. Sometimes I pray that my faith will move all my troubles out of the way, heal my pain, solve my problems, weed them out of my life and bury them in the sea. But nowhere does Jesus make promises like those. It is always good to pray for God's help in sorting out my troubles, to pray for God's wisdom in figuring out my problems, to pray for God's strength in my weakest times, to pray for God's healing in my hurt, my pain, my illness, to pray for God's peace when it seems like everything's falling apart all around me. And certainly there are times when God answers those prayers just the way we wanted him to. But there are also times when God's answer comes slowly. Or God's answer seems to be, not yet, not now. Or even times when God seems simply, mysteriously silent. Perhaps that's when we need to remember that Jesus, who speaks of uprooting mulberry trees, also told us that if we follow him in faith, we will need to take up our cross and walk in his footsteps. Or as St. Paul wrote to us in the day's second reading, to bear our share of hardship for the gospel. Jesus, who had more faith in God than all of humankind put together, Jesus, like us, also prayed to be delivered from his pain and suffering. After taking up his own cross, he cried out from the arms of the cross, "Father, why have you abandoned me? How long, Father, will I hang here?" After his prayer, his lament, he was met with God's mysterious silence. When we find ourselves praying, "How long, O God?" we can be sure that no one understands our prayer better than Jesus. We can be sure that when our lament rises up from the depths of our hearts, no one is closer to the pain from which our prayer rises than Jesus. He's been there. He's done that. He knows it. In today's reading from Habakkuk, which was written in Hebrew, and from Luke, which was written in Greek, the Hebrew and Greek words that get translated as faith would actually be better translated as steadfast loyalty. There's a difference here, huh? I think we often think of faith as that thing that's going to make everything okay for us. And that's very different than steadfast loyalty in the face of our suffering. That very brand of loyalty and love that stands firm even in the face of hard times, in the face of dashed dreams and failed expectations. What Jesus promises us in today's gospel is that faith, even faith the size of a tiny mustard seed, faith is sufficient to help us accept and live with and live through all the problems, troubles, and disappointments that are ours, that are everyone's. And to do that with confidence that we never bear our cross, our suffering alone, but that Jesus always bears it with us. The Lord meets us where faith leads us. The Lord meets us in the heart of our pain. He doesn't wait for us on the other side of our troubles to see if we pass the test. He meets us in our troubles. It's faith that brings us to the Lord who walks with us through our pain until that finally peace is ours. It's our faith, our steadfast loyalty to Jesus, that helps us believe and trust that there is one greater than all our suffering, who desires our healing and our peace just as much, even more, than we do. Whether our faith moves mountains and trees or not, it is enough to move us to trust in God when all seems lost. It was the lament Jesus prayed on the cross that led him only moments later, in the face of God's silence, to pray words of trust and hope when he uttered, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Faith, even faith the size of a mustard seed, is great enough to move us from lament to hope. The hope that enables us to pray the rest of what we heard from Habakkuk this afternoon, that the vision of faith still has its time. It presses on to fulfillment. It will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. Wait for it with steadfast loyalty. It's by no accident or coincidence, but rather by design, that we pray here every week in the shadow of the cross of Jesus, the outstretched arms of Jesus on the cross. Those arms reach out to the suffering in the hearts of everyone here who prays, who laments, "How long, O Lord?" Those arms embrace and tenderly hold the hearts of all of us who struggle in faith to know and accept what's ours in life, and with God's help, to find healing and peace. At this altar, Jesus, the innocent one who surrendered himself for us, the guilty, Jesus feeds and nourishes and strengthens us with the bread of life in the Eucharist, food for hungry hearts, hoping, praying, lamenting for peace. The vision still has its time, presses on. Increase our faith, Lord, that we might trust in you while we pray, while we wait, while we hope in faith.